Gareth Bennett.
On the weekend, I had the pleasure of using local train services across Northern England and Scotland. The trains ran on time, services connected with one another, and there were plenty of seats for people to sit on. I think it's fair to say that people using trains in Wales aren't receiving quite the same treatment. Leader of the House, are you and your government in full agreement with Transport for Wales Director of Customer Services, Bethan Jelfs, when she said recently that customers must share the pain of the recent rail disruption?
No, of course, we are very sorry indeed, as many people have said in the Chamber over the last week or so, to find ourselves in the position where Transport for Wales has inherited a fleet of trains very substandard and substantially not what we'd expect, frankly, from years and years and years of underinvestment in the private sector. So we have a very firm recovery plan in place. The Cabinet Secretary for Economy and Transport met with the CEO of Transport for Wales last week to seek assurance that that recovery plan was there. It was confirmed at that meeting that Transport for Wales and Network Rail have operationalised a full recovery plan to manage the situation, and that we will be receiving regular updates from the CEO of Transport for Wales on progress against that plan. The engineers from Transport for Wales and from Network Rail are working around the clock to resume services as soon as possible. We've only had the franchise for just under a month. We cannot correct the underinvestment of 15 years in 4 weeks.
Yes, I appreciate the problems that were inherited by Transport for Wales, of course, but I do wonder whether some of the things that Transport for Wales have recently been presiding over are difficulties of their own making. For instance, it's been well publicised that around 25 to 30% of the fleet covering Wales and borders has been removed for servicing and repair. Of course, I realise that train wheels are subject to wear and tear, which might be accelerated by leaves on the line during the autumn of any year. Given that this is a difficulty faced by all train franchises every single year, surely the way in which Transport for Wales' well-paid officers should be dealing with this is by expecting and anticipating this issue and then planning for it in advance. Most rail users simply don't understand why 25% of the fleet had to be withdrawn all at the same time this autumn. Why could the withdrawal not be staggered to, say, 5% at a time over 5 weeks, rather than 25% all at once in a week?
Transport for Wales have done an absolutely fantastic job, and 10% of the fleet are now back in action again. So I think actually they're to be praised for the swiftness of their response. And clearly there are real issues with keeping trains that are substandard in operation that the member, I don't have to reiterate to the member. We are working very hard to make sure that the fleet is back in action. As I say, the operational recovery plan is in place. The Cabinet Secretary is receiving regular updates. We very much want to make sure that the service to the people of Wales is as good as it possibly can be as we go into the autumn.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Leader of the House, and I hope that the fleet is back in good condition, in good time for the passengers, and I hope the passengers do get the benefits of that. Passengers at the moment, though, are not just frustrated about train delays. In recent weeks, I've had complaints from constituents that during morning rush hour, there have been long queues of passengers in Cardiff stretching right across the station. The queues comprised passengers who'd completed their journeys but were unable to buy a ticket either at their starting train station or from a member of staff on the train, so they had to go to the unpaid fares counter at Cardiff Central Station. The time it took to get through this queue was sometimes averaging 20 to 30 minutes. Now, we had issues with the previous operator, Arriva, whereby they were threatening to fine lots of people hundreds of pounds for not having valid tickets. And then, of course, it transpired that many of the ticket machines on their unstaffed stations weren't actually working. So now we seem to be going through a whole new ticketing palaver with the new operator. Now, I know it's early days, Leader of the House, we all accept that, but what can you do to assure the rail users that the new service is not going to simply go on replicating all the problems of the old one?
No, very much part of the new franchise is to move to the ticketless systems that you see if you go to Transport for London, for example. Almost all of the services are ticketless. So we'll be moving to that. The investment is very much there. That's very much part of the plan to move to ticketless operations as fast as possible.
Question 3.